All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. We are reading from Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's Wisdom of the Ages. And that's why we're here, because we're trying to use, this book says 60 days to enlightenment, but we're trying to use every day to try to get closer to enlightenment. Because, you know, it's one of those things that I've read, ladies and gentlemen, that can take many lifetimes, not just one. So let's get into today's teaching from Wisdom of the Ages. It comes to us from Robert Browning. Well, actually, it comes to us from Wayne Dyer, but then a poem from Robert Browning. And if you remember, previously we read from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And so let's jump right into the description here. Robert Browning, 1812 to 1899. The English poet whose romance and marriage to Elizabeth Barrett Browning was told, or well, Elizabeth Barrett previously, was told in the play The Barretts of Wimpole Street. And that's something that Wayne Dyer often suggests to find and watch. If you have the ability with, you know, nowadays technology, you can just about find and watch anything that existed at one point. But he says it's a very deep and moving story. And so Robert Browning enjoyed enormous success with the publication of The Ring and the Book after 40 years of writing sensitive poetry. Today's chapter by Dr. Wayne Dyer is titled Perfection. And so I'll take a sip of my tea here if it's cooled down enough. I hope it's a great day wherever you are. It's beautiful and sunny out. It was a warm one yesterday, and it's going to be warm again today, but that doesn't mean that I don't like warm tea still. Even kind of hot. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the poem begins like so. The years at the spring and days at the morn, mornings at 7, the hillsides dew pearled, the larks on the wing, the snails on the thorn. God's in his heaven, all rights, all's right with the world. That's an interesting and quick one. It gives a simple but beautiful way of looking at the world. The years at the spring and the days at the morn, mornings at 7. So it's just like telling you what time it is, kind of painting a picture. You know, springtime in the morning about 7, looking at a beautiful dew-covered hillside, and there's larks and snails on the thorn. God's in his heaven. And so all's right with the world. Interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what Wayne Dyer has to say about this one. To me, it's painting a picture of, you know, the nature doing its thing, and that it's all like the Tao is doing it all. But that's my own interpretation. Wayne Dyer begins by saying Robert Browning and his equally famous wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, were Victorian poets who were faulted for their spiritual and metaphysical optimism they expressed in their poetry. And that's fascinating. And their dramatic writing. I say that's fascinating because I almost get that from people. I'm sometimes, you know, I think I'm nuts for some reason, or maybe that's a intense way to put it. I always like using, you know, intense analogies or metaphors to try to get the point across for things. But how, you know, Wayne Dyer describes it there, camera's being a little glitchy, but that's fine. We'll continue on. It's like the you know, you're almost faulted for the spiritual and metaphysical optimism that you have. And you know, I think that once you study spirituality and metaphysics and mysticism and the wisdom of the ages and the wisdom of the Tao and many other spiritual teachings, you start to build this kind of spiritual and mystical, metaphysical optimism. almost even magical optimism, because it really creates new things in your life. When you come at life with this new kind of optimism, knowing, as the poem said, all's right with the world, regardless of our opinions and how we judge it. And being able to get to that point to where you really do feel it sometimes thoroughly, and maybe more often than not, that all's right with the world. And most people would argue to their end, to the opposite of that opinion. And isn't it funny, ladies and gentlemen, how we love to defend our misery? All right, sorry, I'm ranting. Let's continue here. A century or more after his death, Robert Browning's 8-line masterpiece reflects that metaphysical optimism for which he was so chastised in his lifetime. Browning speaks of a majestic awe, and perfection in the universe, as if he's trying to say to us, take a look around you. Everything is just as it should be. If you notice me looking off to my left, or probably your right, I keep looking at the flowers I have outside here that are in the sun. They always stand out to me. If you appreciate Browning, then you agree with him that springtime and morning are miracles to behold. They represent the birth of new life, which remains a mystery, even in more mystical teachings that talk about the cycles, referring to what was being said there about springtime being the time of rebirth and renewal. The heart starts beating, inside of a mother's womb a few weeks after conception, and all our greatest scientific and pessimistic observers are totally mystified. Where was that life before? Where will it go after here? What begins it? I mean, what stops it? Why? These questions baffle the critics and are the wellspring of great poetry and mystical wisdom. I'm adding a few words here and there if you can't tell. Wayne Dyer continues, the very essence of living one's life, feeling awe rather than awful, right? Just think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Uh-oh, there goes a couple books. At least I didn't knock over the tea. It's all right, they're my notes anyways. And so, I mean, think of that. Most people go through their lives with this feeling of awfulness, everything's just, and maybe even worse than that. And rather than being truly in awe, like the observer that we're always talking about, becoming the observer and being at awe and connecting to that, that universal force and becoming inspired in spirit. It's shocking. Now, let us continue before I ramble on too much more. Feeling at awe rather than awful is to see the simple spiritual truth in Browning's poetic observation. The dew still covers the hillside, even though the poet is buried beneath it. Oh, and the lark flies above all graves. God's in his heaven, and all's right with the world. And now, for those of us that are going to get hung up here on terms about anthropomorphizing God, or the term God, rather than, great, whatever you want to call it, just keep in mind that we're getting at the philosophy, the overarching lessons that we get from this. And so when it said God's in his heaven, the his in heaven, and you can switch those words to, whatever suits your spiritual perspective, whether it's universe or Tao or great spirit, or, whether it's a female God in her heaven, or whether this here right now is heaven, ladies and gentlemen. All's right with the world in all of those viewpoints. Now, anything you notice, Wayne Dyer continues, that is inconsistent with Robert Browning's poetic observation is not the fault of quote unquote God or source or Tao. Rather than seeing ourselves as connected to this world, we often feel that we are in it to push it around and make it conform to us. You see, this is the point that we're always getting at here, ladies and gentlemen, going beyond our physical ego minds. Rather than accepting it, Wayne Dyer continues, we twist it to feed our ego, creating havoc, imbalance, and what we then call imperfection. Then the ultimate irony, we blame God for the very conditions that we create out of the perfection that is our gift from this very source, whom some call God. I'm like, that's just hilarious. I was just noticing the Hendrix down here. I love this shirt. Now, that's a wonderful sentiment though there, because I think even people who have become so disconnected spiritually that they've eliminated the possibility of there being a great force or a great source energy, universal organizing intelligence, divine essence, whatever you want to call it. I mean, some people are still stuck on the, God's like Santa up in the sky. And if that's where you're at, then, more power to you. I love everybody as we're learning here, but there's, different levels of understanding spirituality and metaphysics and mysticism. And so, but some people are so low that they've totally eliminated the idea. There is no God. No, there is no great force, whatever. Everything, there is no reason or purpose or, how could you watch flowers grow and think that there is no organizing intelligence that is inexplicable? I'm like, how does a plum seed turn into a plum tree and make more plums? Is it just plum essence doing the whole thing? And that's another great Wayne Dyer speech. So, but anyways, where I'm going there is even these people that have eliminated the possibility of there being a great organizing intelligence, a great force or God, they still will blame something outside of themselves. They're like, well, oh yeah, the universe is just, I don't know how to say it because I use these terms, but isn't it funny that they'll, when we twist it to feed our ego, creating havoc, imbalance, and then what we call imperfection, then the ultimate irony is we blame whatever it is, even if we don't have this, God or great force connection. I'm just getting off on a rant here again about how we defend our misery, and it's so wild to me, and it's so ironic. And so it's like, rather than seeing these things as a great gift that come out of this inexplicable perfection of creation that we are and are continually being a part of. And so Wayne Dyer continues and says, the poet says, be at peace. Don't judge the world, observe it. And how many times have we said that in both of these series? Observe it, become the observer. Don't try to straighten it. Don't try to straighten it out, accept the perfection of its crookedness. And see, that's the problem with what I was just discussing, is I sometimes find it hard to accept the crookedness of us defending our misery. But that is part of the perfection, because the growth is in these processes. And so, see, even I am nowhere near mastery, ladies and gentlemen. I feel I have at least a few more lifetimes to go before I've reached the higher level. But you know what I mean? It's fantastic to continue to go through this kind of stuff and continue to try to learn and grow and get to a higher quality of life, because so many of us struggle and suffer when I think all that's needed is a perspective change and a new understanding, a new awareness, which to some is the definition of enlightenment. I kind of more like the definition of being immersed in and surrounded by peace at all times because of a new awareness and a knowing and a certainty. But Wayne Dyer can, if you're getting value, smash the like button and leave me a comment and tell me to stop ranting so much. Unless you like the ranting, then let me know that too. All right, Wayne Dyer continues. Don't manufacture problems for yourself. We have to accept the perfection of the crookedness and live in harmony with it. Trees bend for a reason, and flowers, this flower over here, it's got a weird angle, and I thought it was messed up, but it kind of just keeps growing and it's doing good. And I accept the beauty of it and begin to live in harmony with the crookedness, metaphorically, of life. Don't manufacture problems. Be in awe of the perfection of it all. In another passage, Robert Browning observes all the wonder and wealth of the mind in the heart of one gem. In the care of one pearl, all the shade and the shine of the sea. Dang, that's really passive. That's really powerful. I was reading the word passage at the same time. All the wonder and wealth of the mind in the heart of one gem. In the care of one pearl, all the shade and the shine of the sea. Truth, that's brighter than gem. Trust, that's purer than pearl. I need to get me some Robert Browning. That's good poetry right there, ladies and gentlemen. He is asking us to look at our world with new eyes. Eyes that are filled with wonder at the miracle that is in every cubic inch of space. Eyes that are moist with apprehension for the truth and trust that transcend their material counterparts, ladies and gentlemen, called gems and pearls. A vision that is void of judgment and focused on the dazzling landscape can change any day that is filled with depression, anxiety, or stress. That right there is a paragraph worth re-listening to, rereading, and highlighting, and then writing down and posting it somewhere conspicuous so that you can see it each day. Because that right there is a life-changing paragraph with that little bit of poetry about the gem and the pearl, truth and trust, and then looking at the world with new eyes to change the way that you literally experience life, ladies and gentlemen. That was powerful. We could end right there, but I think we still got another page here. So we're about 3/4 of the way through. If you're getting value, smash the like button. And if you're getting value, really get this book for yourself so you can have it on your shelf, so you can reference that particular paragraph. I know I'm going to highlight it once I'm done here today, and maybe even put a little footnote there. But to imply, see, what I really should do is what Wayne does, is I should write that paragraph and then expand for a whole couple pages on what that means to me. And then that could be the beginning of the book that I write in the same, format here that Dr. Dyer does so beautifully. That was a good one. To imply that the world is perfect is to draw the ire of many social commentators who prefer to notice a multitude of imperfections, which is most of us, I'll add. And, they tend to focus on all that is wrong with the world and encourage us to do the same thing, and thus to become a part of the large number of people who despair over the imperfection of the world. Is this not a perfect description of what's been going on for as long as we can remember? And like, society is teaching us to freak out constantly, all the time. I mean, you can tell this is a point that I'm passionate about here, ladies and gentlemen. They want us to think that everything's terrible and everything's going bad. And I'm like, all you have to do is, turn on the news for 1 second, but you don't even got to do that. You can go to any source. And I'm telling you, it's crazy. Everybody just wants to think that everything is terrible and they can't notice and they're not seeing. what this chapter is all about. Recognizing the true beauty in the world and knowing that all is right. All is right with it. This page is powerful. You can obviously tell it's getting me. To imply the world is perfect is to draw the ire of many social commentators. And they all focus on what's wrong with the world, and then they encourage us to do the same thing and thus become a part of their own crabs in the bucket, pulling each other back down. But to those who say all's right with the world, as Robert Browning does, there will be a truckload of skeptics to tell you how absurd your thinking is. And believe me, I understand it. That's why I begin here. You're faulty about your optimism, your spiritual optimism. Just as there were in the Victorian days, and probably even 2,500 years ago with Lao Tzu, 2,000 years ago, when, whether you think his name's Jesus or the great master, or, there's different descriptions, or whether it was just a myth of great teaching. But 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, the Victorian days, ladies and gentlemen, there will always be a truckload of skeptics and maybe even people trying to burn you at the stake or put you on a cross, or, some sad stories. Hypatia. Search up Hypatia, because that's a really sad story. Some of the things they did to the great wisdom keepers of Alexandria. But, sorry, I was getting off there. The Victorian days, when critics pointed to slavery, economic disaster, and warfare as their response. Yet Browning chose to look beyond the man-made world. And this is what I encourage you to do as well, ladies and gentlemen. Wayne Dyer is saying this to us in his writing, and I'm saying it to you. And Robert Browning was saying it to us. And all of the great teachers have been saying it to us for the longest time. To choose to look beyond the man-made world, the physical world that we are in, but not of. And this is what I encourage all of us to do as well. Sorry, I didn't even repeat that last part. Look to the perfection that is the universe of which you are part and parcel. See how the earth continues to orbit, if that's what you think it does, and hurl through space, if you think space exists. I love the funny theories that are out there, and they're fascinating nowadays. Independent of your and everyone else's opinion. See, that's what you got to have your own opinion, ladies and gentlemen, and hold two opposite opinions at the same time, and you'll really begin to grow then. But, it doesn't matter. See how every single day, mornings at 7, and go back through all the isms that have been tried, failed, tried again, and still mornings at 7. And the hillsides dew pearled, covered in the beautiful pearls of dew. There is a hillside over here. I've never caught it covered in the dew yet, but I guarantee if I'm up at 7, then I can do it. But usually those are work days, ladies and gentlemen. This is really only a simple turnabout from noticing what's wrong to noticing the perfection of our world. And that's literally the title of the other series we're doing on Tuesdays, Tuesday Dow. Change your thoughts, you change your life. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I love that saying. Love that saying. So start changing the way you look at things, ladies and gentlemen, because how's it working for you already? If it's good, then great, stay where you're at. But if it sucks, and you're not liking the things that you're seeing, then start changing the way that you're looking at them. And the things that you're seeing will begin to change. Now, blah, 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 Earth continue, instance, consider the necessity of lightning-inspired forest fires over the centuries for the proper maintenance of ecological balance. We have a tendency to say God shouldn't burn down the forests or blow so hard as to create hurricanes or rumble about so as to incur earthquakes. We think these things should not occur, yet they too are part of the perfection of it all. And when we see them from a larger perspective, we begin to acknowledge the perfection in the chaos. And, I'll add, I know a lot of people lose lives in these kind of disasters. And you might be asking yourself, well, how in the world, Chase, could the lost lives in disasters be part of the perfection? And that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're asking that question, is a great question to ask, because that's once you start to discover the answers to that question, then you really begin to find peace in your life. Because when it comes to all these spiritual teachings, mystical, metaphysical, non-physical, multiple lifetimes kind of ideas, you begin to answer some of the most troubling questions that there are to ask. And if you're asking those questions, begin to research those questions in your own ways, ladies and gentlemen, because the answers are out there, especially in ancient spiritual literature, no matter the tradition. Now, I thought that was important. Let me continue. We think those things should not occur. From a larger perspective, we begin to acknowledge the perfection in the chaos. The way to a peaceful life is to notice the perfection in God's world, or, the universe, the great creation that we are a part of, that we are not separate from in the world. Just simply notice the beauty and the perfection of it and ourselves and nurture that perspective. But just like a plant that you're trying to grow, water it, treat it well, give it sunlight, fertilize it, nurture it. And, Elizabeth, Robert Browning's wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, wrote 2 lines about that perspective in My Kate, Wayne Dyer says, that nicely sum up all of this. The weak and the gentle, the ribald and the rude, she took as she found them and did them all good. When you look out with wide eyes of wonder and appreciate all that you see as a gift, including your own life, whether it's good or bad, but it is working in harmony with nature and the laws of the universe. And there are those things. If you don't know about the laws of nature, that might be why there's not so much harmony in your life. There are mystical traditions that talk about how to create your own life using these laws of reality. That was my own bit there. Including your own life, working in harmony with nature. And you will know what the poet meant when he wrote, God's in heaven and all's right with the world. The great creative divine intelligence is exactly doing as it should be. And everything is exactly where it should be when you can have a new perspective. I have no idea what I'm going to title this video. And like, this one's so deep and the brightness might have been a bit too much because the camera's been a bit flashy, but whoosh, this has been fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. To adopt this metaphysical optimism, this is what I love about Wayne Dyer and these books, both Wisdom of the Ages and Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, is that he gives us these practical ways that we could take these crazy out there metaphysical concepts and spiritual ideas and mystical teachings and begin to apply them practically in our life. And this is why you should expand the description and use the link and get the book for yourself so that you can continue to grow in your life. And there's no age to school. Remember yesterday's teaching, we all are students and teachers at all times. Maybe I should change the title of that video to that. But anyways, Number one, to adopt this metaphysical optimism, begin to, number one, give yourself a gift of 5 minutes of contemplation in awe of everything you see around you. Go outside and turn your attention to the many miracles that are around you. This 5-minute a day regimen of appreciation and gratitude will help you to focus your life in awe. Number two, allow the word perfection to be a part of your vocabulary. From the Prince of Peace. That's a good title for it. I'm always wondering for an alternative title. From the Prince of Peace, be ye perfect, even as your Father, which is in heaven, is perfect. So you can get thrown off depending on what you know about certain words there, but take it as you will. Be ye perfect, even as the source, which is all around us, is perfect. Or be ye perfect, even as nature, which we are a part of, is perfect. Those are good translations, I think. You don't always have to be perfect to perceive yourself and the world from the perspective of judging it and trying to improve it. Enjoying the perfection is one way to apply the wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen. And number three, remind yourself that you are just as much of a miracle as that dew and that lark and that snail and the gem and the pearl and the forest and the mine and the mountain and the ocean and the water and the waves and the sand on the beach and the stars in the sky. You are just as much of a miracle as all of that, ladies and gentlemen, and know that and really nurture that perspective. You, in fact, are what God is doing. Or in the way of the Tao, you are what the Tao is doing. And you are doing nothing, but yet leaving nothing undone. Trust in and value your own divinity, as well as your connection to nature, seeing the divine work every place. And that in itself will be your reward, ladies and gentlemen. Woo! A round of applause. I might need to get the applause app. I was just looking at the apps they got on here. There's a little applause studio one. They also added whiteboards, all kinds of stuff on Zoom here now. It's kind of wild. But man, ladies and gentlemen, I hope somebody watched that whole thing, and I hope that was all recorded, because that was fantastic. That's a life-changing chapter there, coming from Wayne Dyer and Robert Browning, and my own personal Chase Croington extrapolations and expansions on these ideas. Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to title it. Well, I hope everybody got value. We'll leave it there. I want to say thank you so much to everybody that spends time out of their day with me and Dr. Wayne Dyer and Barrett Browning and Lao Tzu and all of the great teachers that there have been throughout the ages. Because that's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to create a higher quality of life for not only ourselves, but everybody that we encounter, and maybe even the universe itself. But we're here to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, to discover the hidden wisdom, the wisdom of the ages, and to make happiness the way rather than the goal. Because when happiness is the way, then the goal becomes irrelevant, ladies and gentlemen, because we're already there. And then we're always at the destination, and we can enjoy the entire journey. That was a good little ending. All right, love you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next week with more Tuesday Tao, change your thoughts, change your life, and wisdom of the ages. And maybe I'll build up the courage to do another video in between then and now. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about this, and if it gets value to you. If it gives value to you, consider subscribing and smash the like button. Also, check the description out. You can purchase yourself a one-of-a-kind landscape painting that I have in my Etsy shop. All right. Till next time, ladies and gentlemen. Na, na, na.